Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and we are back with, I guess, the second installment of the TSWN book club. We are going through this book right here, Dark Force Rising. This is an awesome book, and we're going to be talking about chapters 7 through 12 today. So whether you have been reading with us or you just want to go along for the deep dive of the book, let's get into it. Okay, so for Dark Force Rising, this is a really cool book, really cool idea that you had. This is a long form podcast, and we have the link to chapters 1 through 6 rather in the description below.
Episode 1 of our book club.
Yeah, and we tried chaptering it out with YouTube descriptions, but YouTube descriptions really didn't like it. Not sure why. So you may not be able to click around. We hope that you can. We hope that YouTube just kind of resolves itself there.
They don't seem to like anything we do.
Yeah, oddly enough. Very strange. But nonetheless,
here we are.
We're basically just documenting our way through the EU. And yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about chapters 7 through 12. It's kind of a review, but it's more so just kind of like a book club discussion. Like, we are going to talk about things we like and things like that, but we're not really rating the book as a whole and rating it against other things that we've read. We're just kind of enjoying the book.
Yep.
So let's get right into it. Chapter 7. So this is where you have Chewbacca and Leia meeting the Nogri. So again, you're getting this whole back and forth of Timothy Zahn writing about these characters and these characters. There's a lot of moving pieces. And basically in chapter 7, this is where Leia, she references, if I remember right, she references like Endor, like it kind of reminded her of Endor, and she remembers like Alderaan, and so she's remembering all these different things, the Nogri home planet is reminding her of. And she experiences a blackout, but she and I want to see what you think about this, because she references how, like, Luke said that he experienced something similar on Dagobah, but we know he didn't black out. And so, I
Unless, I was like, I guess you guys have a different definition of blackout than I do.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting how she's kind of not dabbling, but she's kind of slowly getting into the Force, into some Jedi ways, and she has her lightsaber and all of this. But it doesn't hit hard like it does with Luke. But did you have any thoughts about that? It's like, it was such a small detail, but I found it really interesting.
Yeah, I found it interesting too, and honestly, I would have liked more to it, especially if she's comparing it to Endor. I feel like it was more than just a blackout, and we missed out on something that could have potentially been super cool and super entertaining. But I also get that's not the point of this story, whereas in in Empire Strikes Back, that's a huge pivotal point in Luke's development, and maybe this is in Leia's too. We haven't finished the book, but for now, we don't really have much detail on what that encounter looked like, and I did wonder, I was like, man, would have liked to know a little bit more, but I'm loving what we're also getting.
Yeah, because on Dagobah, it was like Luke was led into this trial through the Force, and it just kind of happened on Leia, and she blacked out. So I don't know. I'm just gonna wait till the end,
right,
to get through all this, and then we have Kabarak, and his. I listened to the audiobook for this portion of it, so there's some pronunciation that I figured out, at least with the narrator there. But yeah, with Kabarak, that's the Nogri that was I guess Leia and Chewbacca ran into, on Kashyyyk and all this, and helped. And a lot of intrigue gets brought back with that particular Nogri.
Yes.
But in addition, in this chapter, there's a lot in this chapter. It's a pretty heavy one. So you kind of have this beginning of Chewbacca and Leia, you know, starting with meeting Kabarak, and then you switch over to Han and Lando on Illic, and they're trying to find out Fileia's
That is
plan.
how you say it? Fileia?
I think so. Fileia. Might be
Mignon.
Leia. Might be Leia.
Leia.
I don't know. They say it so quick.
Yeah.
And it's super late, so I'm kind of like a little delusional. But nonetheless, basically with Han and Lando, they're kind of like scheming all this stuff, and you keep hearing about Lando's ship, the Lady Luck. You get to hear about that a lot. So it's weird because you go from the Millennium Falcon to then, you know, Lady Luck. But
I want to see the Lady Luck.
Yeah, that would
in
be
action.
That'd be cool. I mean, it feels like we're watching a movie when you read it. But this is where Han is taken hostage, so to speak. You know, he's taken captive. He's detained by one of these Bothans, you know, that are following him. So all this stuff starts happening. Then, is there anything on that in particular? It's just kind of a moving piece.
I think you covered it.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't want to cover everything here, but
well, remember, I'm ahead, so these are more fresh to you.
Yeah, but I'm also long-winded, and you're more succinct.
We're a great compliment.
Okay, that works.
A team.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But then you cut to Luke in a cantina, and he's talking about how it's like the Mos Eisley cantina, and it's very similar for him. And I'll hand this off to you, because this probably excites you.
Get some peppermint hot chocolate, my favorite.
Why do you have to say it all funny?
It's not. I'm just happy.
Yeah, he's drinking. I mean, it's such a funny thing that he's like, he loves hot chocolate.
I love that. Like, even when I first read Heir to the Empire, and I remember I stopped reading and came told you. It's like, Luke is drinking hot chocolate, and then now it's peppermint hot chocolate. Like,
you guys would be buddies.
Yeah, we would be best friends.
Well, it's funny. It's like of the mint variety or something like that. It's like a very funny way. But this was I actually really liked this little scene, because basically what happens is he's in a cantina, stuff starts popping off between, I think it's a Barbell. I think that's how they pronounced it in the audiobook. But Barbell and a Rodian, basically this dispute starts kicking off, and they start fighting and yelling at each other. And, you know, at one point this droid speaks up, and the Barbell kills the droid or whatever, shoots it. And so they're like, we want the Jedi, you know. And then they're all like, well, you're Luke, aren't you? And it's like, anyway, all this cool. I really enjoyed this part.
Yeah, super entertaining. Even because I was reading it and you listen, so obviously it's a different perspective. But this part in particular is very well written and keeps you engaged in like with the back and forth and and I think it serves really well as a way of explaining how things kind of work right now. And I think now that I'm looking at it, not like going through it in real time, it is kind of like, oh, well, this person's there and also this person's there. So it's when you just kind of explain it, you're kind of like, oh, of course, everybody's there. But when you read it, it's actually totally different. It doesn't feel cheapened at all. Right.
But basically, this Barbell and Rodian are fighting because the Rodian hired the Barbell because of his race's, I guess, ability to like track and hunt and all of this, and to find out all this stuff. And then the Rodian took care of it and took the money, and now he's not paying him enough. And so basically what you find out,
drama.
Yeah, he was paid in new Imperial credits, and he didn't give, the Rodian did, and he didn't pay the Barbell enough. So like Lando comes in and Lando's like talking all smooth, and he helps. And then
you.
Yeah, that was my Lando attempt. That was pretty poor, and so he's like helping and all of this, and then again, Luke, like Lando in our last video, he smells Niall's fairy air. It's just so funny that anytime this guy shows up, somebody smells him.
He's got a scent.
Everybody's like, Niall's. It's just funny. But Niles shows up, and Niles, like, basically this whole thing is like, hey, Niles, you're going to take the Imperial credits, and all of this stuff is going to get settled. You're going to pay the barbell, blah, 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 all this. And anyway, it's a lot of interesting stuff, but it doesn't move the story too long. It's just really good world building. But you get to see Luke negotiate. Like, even the way he starts off, he, like, ignites a lightsaber and puts it between them. And I was like, dang.
Awesome.
But you basically see he's just kind of like winging it. And trusting the Force. He doesn't really know what to do. And then this chapter ends with the sirens of an Imperial raid that is happening. And at some point you find out that it's pretty normal, and we'll explain why it's normal. But
one thing on before we move on to chapter 8, I liked how... I know I kind of already said how I liked, I guess, I don't know if it's called a scene in a book. Yeah. Okay. Well, I liked that scene, and I liked how on the inside Luke's like, doesn't really know what's going on, but then he plays it off. Like, he's like, oh yeah, this is my daily life. But like, then you get to see his, I guess, like, just no plan, really no agenda, just relying on the Force. And he's like, man, I don't really know what's happening. And so I thought that was actually really cool to get like an insight, because you don't get that too often. Yeah, and that's a shortcoming of film, is that you can't really portray that. But yeah, it was fairly interesting because, he really wanted like political experience that he just did not have. Which is interesting because Leia wants the Jedi experience and Luke wants the political experience. Yep. And they're twins, look at this. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Okay, chapter 8. So, this is where you have Han being interrogated by the very one that... Oh, your headphone keeps falling out. But yeah, this is where Han is... I don't know if interrogated is the right word. He's been questioned. But wait, what did you say? He's been questioned by the very one? But then your headphone fell out. So it was mid-sentence. But who's the very one? No, by the very one who detained him. Yes. So they're questioning him, all this, and the Bothan basically calls him an Imperial spy. And it's like, that's like the worst thing you can call Han Solo. You could say to Han. Right. I really did like his humor in this. He was like smooth and just like classic Han, he's like trying things and saying things, like he does so well at writing the characters. Yeah. And Cena, that's the name of the person who takes Cena. Yes. Cena's not a Bothan, but Cena anyway. The whole time there's like the raid alarms going on because Han, Lando, and Luke, they're all on the same planet. They're on the same place, trying to do things. And so basically what you find out is that the Imperial raids are expected. Yeah. And it's like a covert way of taxation, basically. So you're just getting more world building, more politics. If that's your thing. Then we go into this whole thing where they're going to try and escape, because basically they're finding out all this stuff like, oh, he's not an Imperial, but are we really sure? Because then he's going to be with the New Republic, and do we want the New Republic? Like, if we just let Han go, what are we going to do? And this guy's trouble either way. Yeah, so Cena and the Bothan are trying to figure out what do we do with him, and basically they
detained him because of a later chapter that we'll cover in this video. They want to get him to somebody, to their boss, basically. And that's kind of alluded to. And so basically there's this idea, okay, we're just going to escape together. And so they're going to do so with the Lady Luck. And there's this pretty cool thing where, like, Lando has this almost like beacon that, like, brings the Lady Luck to him.
Oh, yeah.
And so all this stuff is happening, and then they're, like, changing it, and Luke fires up his X-Wing and, like, lights everybody up in this hangar bay. Just crazy stuff. And I was curious, how did you like, because then it goes into a space fight, which is really cool. I mean, but I mean, how did you like the action sequences, reading them, like both in the hangar bay and the space fights?
Again, I thought they were really well done, and I haven't read a lot of sci-fi books, so I can't, like, I don't know if it's normal that you can normally understand and follow what's going on in, like, a fight action scene. But in the couple that I have, I feel like Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising, he does a really good job at that. And, like, like I said in the last video, like, you feel like you're just like a wallflower? Yeah. And you're there.
You're just watching, like, everything, yeah.
Dang, this is crazy. And but it's not, like, overdone either. It's not like, oh my gosh, why so much detail? It's like the perfect amount.
Yeah, I will say I've read a lot of sci-fi. There's some really hard sci-fi that I've read where it's like there's so much detail, and I like how he'll throw in things that aren't real, just to a degree where it keeps you interested. And there's, like, specific details about where they're going, what's going on, and he doesn't just spoon feed you everything, you know. Right. It helps you pay attention.
Yeah.
So basically in this, what you have is that Han, Lando, and Cena are joining up with this dreadnought that is right outside, because you have, like, a Star Destroyer and these 3 dreadnoughts, and you have, like, TIE fighters, and you have the X-Wing and the Lady Luck, all this stuff. So the Lady Luck hooks up with this massive dreadnought, and they're going to go meet with Cena's mysterious commander. You don't really know. And Luke decides that he's going to go to Jomar, and we know that Sabaoth is on Jomar.
Yeah.
So again,
and that's why he's going.
Yeah. And so again, you're just getting into all this craziness is starting to get set up, you know. It's amazing how much he can just add cliffhangers each chapter. You know, it's pretty impressive, actually.
It's hard to put the book down sometimes.
Yeah. And especially this little section, the way, I mean, we just kind of arbitrarily broke it up. But the way this one was broken up, these chapters in particular started to flow together really, really well.
Yep.
Okay.
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9. So we have Kabarak, Chewbacca, and Lady Vader.
That's what we have to call her from now on.
Princess Leia, Lady Vader. Such an awesome title. And so you have the 3 of them together, and they're in Kabarak's ship. And basically, it's a 4.
And originally, she wasn't supposed to bring anyone.
Yes.
But Han was like, Chewbacca's going with, like, someone's going with you. Yeah. And then obviously C-3PO went. But and I liked how at first he's like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, the droid can go. So you can, I think it's for translation purposes. And then she explains the life debt that Chewbacca has. And he's like, oh, well, we have that in common. So that was cool detail. That
was cool, because then they're like, oh, well, the Wookiees and the Nogris, they're like, our cultures are similar. So the Nogri understood.
Right.
And yeah, Chewbacca gets pissed in this chapter. He really does. It gets crazy.
I just wanted to give Chewbacca a hug. It's like, it's okay, buddy.
Yeah, he's just a very sensitive.
He is. It's so cute.
Very sensitive Wookiee.
And he loves his people.
He does. And it was cool because you do get to see the life debt, because even the Nogri Kabarak's like, basically, I mean, I don't sound anything like a Nogri, but the Kabarak basically says, oh, well, he has a life debt to Han Solo, your husband, and he's extended it to you.
Right.
And he's extended it to your children, because that's the thing she keeps weighing on, is that she has children, and then they're like, oh, this is like Darth Vader's descendants.
Right.
You know. But yeah, they find out it's a 4-day journey to the Nogri homeworld.
Which was funny.
Why? Why was that funny?
Because like, oh yeah, you know, we're going. Oh. Yeah, you can come. And then like, okay, yeah, how long is it?
4 days.
No. And it just seemed like they were not expecting that.
Well, that to me was interesting, because you don't see the space travel take that long in the movies. So
maybe that's why it was funny too.
Well, I did find it funny too, because then they're like, oh wow. And the Nogri keeps to himself pretty much.
Yep.
He's just like, yeah, not really talking to him. But that I was interested. I'm like, why? I guess in a movie, you know, it's, you don't want 4 days of travel, but it just shows you how big the galaxy is. Yes. And I did like that. That was pretty cool. So day 4, when they finally show up, there's a Star Destroyer there. None other than the Chimera. Grand Admiral Thrawn's Star Destroyer. Boom. Right there. And Chewbacca gets so upset.
He thinks he's been betrayed.
Yeah. I mean, when you read it, you're like, crap.
I know I wasn't sure. I'm like, But part of me, I felt like I was like, man, I kind of trust this guy. Like, I don't think...
You're like Leia, I'm like Chewbacca. I'm like, kill him, Chewie. A traitor. And you're like, no, there's good here. But yeah, Chewbacca, Leia's like, yo, chill.
And
he's like pounding on the door.
And then he stuns him.
First he like throws him. He does some, they don't really say what, but he like does some like hip toss deflection. And then, stuns him. But then it causes problems, because then it shows up on the readout.
Right.
There's like this readout from the Star Destroyer where they see that happen. And to cover their life forms showing up on some scanning, they have to do all this special stuff to basically kind of cloak the ship.
Right.
Which is a bunch of red flags, right? And they get called... kind of like to be like, yeah, you're told you can land, and it's delayed because he's fighting off Chewbacca, and so they bring unnecessary attention to themselves. But you do find out, poor Chewie.
He's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and you know he does chill a little bit, but you find out some really interesting details. Because you have the whole thing with Lady Vader and how the Nogri worship Vader, basically. But how at a certain point in time, Vader had to specifically focus on the enemies of the Emperor. So he handed off the Nogris to Thrawn.
Yep.
And so basically he's like, hey, you're their lord now. Like, you literally are over them. And yeah, it's just very fascinating, you know. And you do in a later chapter we'll also cover, you find out a little bit more kind of about that story.
I'm sure we'll continue to.
Yeah, you find out. I don't know if it's exactly that story, but you do find out about Vader. But anyway. So all those anomalies that happen on Kabarak's ship.
Can't pull that stuff with Thrawn.
Nope, Thrawn is notified. And
Pelion just thinks it's nothing. Yeah.
And again, you see his character development in that he kind of is yielding to Thrawn's judgment. It's quite interesting. But basically he finds out that it's Karabak's ship.
Another red flag to him.
And that he's the only one of the Nogris that survived from his command unit on the mission to Kashyyyk, with Chewbacca and Leia.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you've really got Thrawn's attention now. The very one we're after.
Yep.
Somehow you show up, And so he's basically like, hey, we don't need to be super upfront, but we need to track this ship.
Yep.
So then we go, do you have any, actually before the next chapter, do you have any thoughts or comments?
The only thing I can think that we didn't really cover that stood out to me was what also stood out to Thrawn is that he didn't Kabarak didn't come back right away. There's this missing period.
Yeah.
So then he's like, okay, why is he coming back now? And so then with all the ship anomalies and all that, it's just, it wasn't looking good for them.
Yeah, because he's like, what are the chances that these kind of mechanical failures would happen on his ship, given his circumstances?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't blame Thrawn at all. It's like, bad news bears. But basically, Kabarak, was not... Chapter 10. Kabarak was... 10. It continues. I love this, that it just continued, flowed right in.
Yep.
I couldn't have dealt with the cliffhanger, but like, we gotta settle this. But basically find out Kabarak did not know that they were there. And it's basically like, hey, you gotta trust me. And he's like, I'm not going to the docking bay like I should. I'm taking you straight to my clan because I have to introduce you to them. Which is
another red flag to Thrawn, but he didn't stop. Yeah.
And then it's also like, is Kabarak setting them up or not? And they're wrestling with that. And Leia's like, we just gotta trust him.
Yeah, I don't have another option.
And Kabarak basically says, like, hey, I've got to introduce you to the clan because, like, I vowed to protect you. And, this was actually a really important thing we forgot. In Chapter 9, a big thing was that if, like, basically they called him a liar, Chewbacca kind of did, and they take their vows so seriously, he's like, no, basically, I will die protecting you.
Right.
And so then he's like, I need to introduce you to my clan because it just got real. And they will protect you the way I will if they accept you. So they're there, and this introduction is happening. And they find out that the Imperials are on their way.
Yep. Heading right to them.
They're not just tracking, they are like going to them. And Chewbacca runs off. And what's really interesting is that you actually find out that there's quite a few things that kind of happen in sync here.
Right.
First off, when we're just looking at Kabarak and his clan, and I think they call it like, it's not like the matriarch, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, I thought it was. I was reading it as matriarch.
It basically the matriarch. That's just what we're gonna say. But the leader of Kabarak's clan basically accepts Leia and is like, yep, we're going to take care of you. We're going to watch all this stuff, right? And then they're like, okay, we're going to hide you. All these plans are set into motion. Thrawn shows up.
Here we go.
Yep. And Thrawn starts questioning Kabarak directly.
I was impressed with how Kabarak handled that. I feel like with Thrawn, I feel like if I could not hide things from Thrawn. I can't hide things from anyone, but that's impressive.
Yeah, and it's even like he didn't twitch, and then on a more particular questioning, he did kind of like give off twitch and an anger. And Pelion, you're kind of seeing it from Pelion's point of view.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because you're watching him, or through his eyes, you're watching the interrogation happening. It's quite interesting. And then basically they just kind of believe him. And they check out the ship with Chewbacca's gone, C-3PO's gone, Leia's gone, right? They're hiding them away. You don't know where yet, but they're hiding them.
Because Chewbacca did his special.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, you see him in the movies, like, working on the Falcon. And even in the book, you see him checking stuff out. And basically, he goes and he messes with it to such a degree to where it looks like a natural mechanical failure. And it even gets past the Imperial, like, mechanic.
Chewbacca's so awesome.
Yeah. And so Thrawn's like, okay, well, we're going to take your ship. And we're going to repair it. We're going to reassign you. As soon as your ship is done, we're going to send you off-world because you're saying that you're loyal to us. And, you know, Cabrak has all these reasonings. He's lying, but he has all these reasonings for, you know, why he was the only one left alive. What was the delay? Why did he come here?
Right.
Because he's saying it's like meditation and all this stuff anyways. And so Thrawn then it's like, hey, we're going to spy on him.
Yep.
You know, keep an eye on him. And yeah, because and this is what I found interesting. He's still talking about how they need to bring Leia to Jerusalem. And really, it seems like for a second, I want to see what you thought. I'm like, it seems like Thrawn legitimately was bested and did not know that Leia was there.
No, I don't think he does.
I mean, he finds something incriminating in a little bit.
Yes.
But I was like, Thrawn actually got bested. I liked that he's not impervious to deception.
I mean, unless more is revealed later, but from what we know at this point, yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh shoot, like,
pulled a fast one on him.
They got Thrawn.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, so obviously all the mystery and tension is building.
Yes.
It's really awesome.
Chapter 11.
Chapter 11. Here we go.
Han and Londo.
So then, yeah, what'd you say? Han and Londo?
I thought that's what it said in
Han and
Untitled.
Londo. Han and Lando. So yeah, with if remember kind of drawing back, you have them on the Lady Luck with Cena, and they're in the Dreadnought. I forgot to mention this. The Dreadnought goes into hyperspace, like boom, and you don't know where they're going. And that's when Luke saw that, and then Luke takes off somewhere else, you know, and well, you know, he's going to Jomar, but you don't know where Han and Lando are going.
Right.
And then the whole thing, I don't remember where exactly it was, but Cena's like, oh, you're going to somebody that, you know, you'll remember, kind of a thing. And Han's like, I mean, you're just like, who the heck is this? You know, who can it be? And I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And then they're talking about the ship that they're coming up on, and it's called the Peregrine. And Han's kind of getting like a little weird because it's this like Corellian legend, and so he's kind of like playing on some insecurities he has when he's like, I don't really like the sound of this.
Right.
And basically it's this old Corellian senator. Yep. It's like I don't remember his first name, but I just in my notes put Senator Bell. Can't remember.
Isn't it Bell Ibis?
Yeah, but what was his first name?
I don't know. I thought it was Bell Ibis.
Yeah, you're right. It is, but I felt like it was Graham. But I'm like, isn't Graham Bell like telephone guy? Anyway, I don't know.
I don't remember.
Bell Ibis.
Bell Ibis is what I remember.
And basically, what you find out is that Han was a punk kid.
Sounds
because
about right.
He's like, you remember me, son? And he doesn't really say it that way, but he's talking to him, and basically he visited Han's school, and Han was always in trouble, and Han was dared to ask him like incriminating questions and questions about corruption as a senator and corruptions on his team. So it was like a 10-year-old kid, or like an 8 or 10-year-old kid. And he's like, hey, excuse me, Senator, like, how do you deal with corruption and like all this stuff? And
which I thought was cool how they went back into their childhood. I'm like, oh, so they go to school? Like, cool.
Yeah. And then Senator Bell Ibis was very interested and kept kept track of him. And yeah, it was just super interesting. So you're finding out, and the whole thing was like he was supposed to be deceased.
Yes.
You know, that the Emperor killed him, but no, he wasn't dead. And they're like, whoa, we really could have used your dreadnoughts and your firepower and your army when we were fighting him. And he's like, well, like, we weren't ready for that. Like, we had no strength. And then it kind of switches gears a little bit. After this whole kind of back and forth between Senator Bell Ibis and Han, all this switches again to like Pelion and Thrawn and stuff. And I thought there's this really subtle but funny scene of where Pelion walks into Thrawn's office and everything's dark.
And Thrawn goes, I smell him.
No. What? Am I tripping? No. I was like, what the heck? We're not reading the same book.
I just thought that'd be funny if Thrawn acknowledged his smell as well.
Yeah, if Timothy Zahn said sardonic and dryly twisted the lip and everybody's smelling each other. But
no, not everyone's smelling each other. Everyone just smells what's his name?
Niles Ferrier.
Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, Pelion walks into Thrawn's office and like he knows what's going on. Basically, Rook likes to hide in the dark and like test out his tracking abilities on Pelion. And so Pelion's like shouting like, I don't have time for this. I've come with a message for the Grand Moff or whatever. And or the Grand Admiral. And Rook like scares him. And there's this back and forth. I just thought it was so like disrespectful to Pelion. Like Rook just does not care about him.
No, he doesn't.
And I was like, that's awesome. But Thrawn doesn't really put up with either of it, and then he starts talking about Corellian art and all this that was on the dreadnoughts, and of course, just like he does, you know.
Just like he does.
Yeah, just like he does. But Niles Ferrier does come into play. They don't smell him.
Maybe I'm sure they do. They probably just don't mention it.
That's true.
Thrawn, I don't think would mention that.
But they talk basically. The Dark Force come up. They don't call them out by name, but they want to know the location of the dreadnoughts, and they supply him with the ship. And Thrawn isn't playing games.
No, he's not.
Thrawn is like, hey, you have 3 months.
Or kaboom.
Quite literally, that's what he says. He says that this is hooked up with a doomsday device where it will self-destruct on the 3 month marker. Whether you have them or not. And so basically, yeah, with Niles Ferrier, he's like, you better either give us a location or give us the ships. Totally crazy. And then stuff starts really heating up really quickly after that.
Yeah.
Which, before we even get to that, I found it really interesting how you have this whole theme running where you're like, you know what Thrawn's going to deal with. And this happened in Heir to the Empire too. But this whole Niles Ferrier thing was like a side note. Like you just get to see like his everyday life kind of what he deals with.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. But he's getting notified that they found a Wookiee hair on Kabarak's ship. Yeah. And then he's going to remind the Nogaries of their loyalty to him.
I do not want to be reminded of anything from Thrawn.
Yeah. And I know that's a lot in that whole scene there, but what stands out to you? Thoughts, opinions?
I liked I think it's in the beginning of that chapter with the Senator Bell Ibis and Han, and how they kind of had that, I guess, connection. They both obviously remember each other. And just how even Han's like asking, where were you? Why haven't you not helped us? Like, I just really liked that part of this chapter, because it's really intrigued me. I'm like, yeah, what's going on with this guy? Like, I'm just excited to, I guess, see how his Bell Ibis character arc or whatever unfolds, because like he's obviously a senator and he's a big big deal, and then it's like he's dead. Okay, now he's not. Like, what's been going on?
And what was interesting, that kind of the tie-in with Thrawn and the Dreadnoughts and the Corellian stuff, he kind of comes to that conclusion that he's like, I think it's this guy because of the Corellian art
right
here. And he's like, and who would they want to talk to in the New Republic? And so he's like, it's Han. So I mean, this dude's he's always on it.
Yep.
Always on it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And we're seeing him get mad, very mad. And I just remember in Heir to the Empire when somebody let Luke get away and cold-blooded killed them. And so to think of, because Pelion was like, do you want total destruction or do you just want a reminder? He's like, for now we're a reminder. And it's like, man, okay. But then we go into the final chapter we're going to talk about today. Chapter 12. Obviously, this one seems a little more, like this section has a little more narrative flow than the first 6. The foundation's kind of already set, so it's a little quicker to go through. But you have Leia. She wakes up and she's really freaked out. She's like reminded of all these things again on like the Force Moon of Endor and all this stuff. But she's in a Nogri bakehouse, and she thought, and it was kind of a callback to A New Hope for me, how she thought she was going to wake up in an Imperial cell. She's like, even though I went to sleep here, I didn't think I was going to wake up here.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting. And there's these little Nogri children, there's little details like their skin color is a little different, but they've got the culture already, and they're talking with her, and so random. C-3PO is weird, like the more you get to hear about him, you're like, why does he do the things that he does?
Ask Anakin.
He bugged Han to where Han banished him, and then you find him volunteering to teach the Nogri because C-3PO was telling stories.
I loved that.
But it was cool. But then the matriarch's like, oh yeah, he volunteered to like teach them. Like, it's not just like he's sitting around telling stories of the New Republic and stuff. Like but he was talking about Vader. So to be fair, that was a kind of... Yeah,
I loved that part because it just reminded me of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
With the sound effects and everything.
Yep.
I was like, this guy, he's always...
I feel like he would bug you.
C-3PO?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure he would. Actually, I don't know. C-3PO's... He's cool to watch, but I feel like if he was like always behind my shoulder... I'm more of an R2 kind of guy. Give me an R2. Or cool. C-3PO probably would bug me.
But you would love him at the same time because he's very helpful.
Probably just banish him from my presence once a month.
You just call him when you need him.
Yeah.
Translate this.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, in this, Leia and the matriarch are deliberating, and I think she says something to the effect of like, I accept you, but I don't welcome you.
Yes, very weird.
It was like, basically like, yeah, I accept that we're going to take care of you, but I don't want you here.
Yeah.
She's like, I want you to leave because you're going to bring more pain. And one of the things that's really important that sets this up is C-3PO. They're talking about the Nogri, and he's basically saying like, oh, they haven't had space travel for very long, and so they're kind of still primitive, and all of this, and blah blah blah, and like, oh well, look at their royalty structure, like they're primitive, And then Leia's like, kind of snaps at him, and it's like, well, Alderaan had royalty, like I'm a princess,
right? And
so anyway. You're kind of shown like, oh, the Nogri aren't advanced. They're kind of transitioning from a primitive society to something a little more advanced. So what you find out is this really crazy, really sad, honestly, even though the Nogri are
interesting.
like kind of bad guys, very violent. But the Nogri, basically there was a space battle happening over their planet, and the perception was that these gods were fighting. And
yeah, this was sad.
They said things like there was no thunder because the gods didn't want to yell at each other. All this really stuff where it was like very interesting. It was like that's how they were perceiving what was going on. They had no context for what was happening in space, right? And then at one point, Leia comes to the realization that something that happened to their planet, which we actually kind of skipped over. When you show up to the planet, there's a lot of death and desolation and stuff, and they're like, the conditions are harsh, all this stuff. So what you find out is that it was basically the Empire and the rebels fighting, is what it sounds like, really early stages. But it was an old rebel ship that got destroyed and crashed into the planet, and they talk about the day the ground shook or something like that. And it created this massive earthquake, released these terrible toxins and chemicals into the air, and it created basically like this acid rain. It was like killing the plants, killing people, making people sick, or the Nogri sick, rather. Right. And so then Leia's like, oh, well, like, I
understand.
Yeah, like, no wonder you don't want anything to do with us. Like, once you realized it was us, you know. And they don't really say that the Nogri know that it was a old Republic ship, but crazy.
Yep.
But then they say how one day Vader came. Just shows up, and they thought he was a god.
Yep.
You know, they're just very crazy stuff. And basically the Nogris are in permanent debt to the Empire. And Leia's like, it's a form of slavery. So she's like, kind of changed. She's a good negotiator, because basically she's like, hey, we want to free the Nogri and give you back your birthright.
Right.
And this whole idea of like, turn your back on the Empire, we'll take care of you, and just let you do your thing. Before the final thing that happens in this, do you have any thoughts on this whole thing with the kind of light Nogri history? And
I thought it was very interesting. Again, it was cool to just have a backstory, and it kind of gives you insight, obviously, to why they are the way that they are. And I could tell, at least I sensed, I don't know if this was intentional, but when Leia was putting together that she thought it was the rebel ship, you know, she's like, dang, like, kind of has that, I guess, not guilt, but this understanding. And just crazy that then Vader shows up and they're like, oh yeah, he's a god and he's saved us, but it's like, your perspective is very wrong. Like, yeah, like Leia says, like, to you, you're in debt, but no, you're actually slaves. Like, this isn't what real freedom looks like. Yeah.
And there's something really crazy too with how Leia, when they were talking about Vader, how she's like, oh, he was redeemed at the end and he turned from his bad ways. And it's almost like they did not want to know that kind of info about Vader. No. Like they were like, we have this idea of who he is.
Well, and their insight is the Empire is good. So then when you hear that
he switched to the other side.
God switched. That's not good news for you.
Yeah. And the sense is they're very tribal, the Nogri. And some tribes are still Vader cultists. Yeah. Basically. And other tribes have changed and sworn their allegiance to Thrawn. And Kabarak's clan in particular, with the matriarch, is kind of known for still being fascinated with Vader more than Thrawn. Right. And that bothers Thrawn. Yes. And so you're just kind of incurring his wrath. Yeah. It's building up. And then the final, I mean, I'm like, we couldn't have picked a better chapter to end this video, because literally it ends with the Chimera itself coming to the village.
I thought it was Cherma.
Oh, no. Yeah, Chimera.
I'm new.
No, it's fine. I mean, we're probably saying half the stuff wrong anyways, but...
Probably more than half.
I mean, I've heard George say Han and Han.
Yep, me too. I was like, bro.
And I hear him say, like, I think it's like Naboo, and he says it like a different way. Like, I've heard him say all these things.
Yeah.
Like Coruscant and Coruscant. I've heard that. I'm like...
Coruscant? I've never heard that.
No, it's just wrong. But anyway, do you have
There's our video.
Oh, jeez. Such a terrible ending.
Thanks for watching our channel.
There's our video. Leave. Do you have any final thoughts as we're wrapping up this section?
I'm excited for the next section because I'm currently on chapter 17 and we're going through 13 and 18, so it's gonna just be pretty fresh for me, and then from there they're all gonna be super fresh, and I'm excited to
Awesome.
finish the book and finish the trilogy.
Nice. Yeah, and for those of you who are watching the whole book club, whether it's one of you making it this far, or it's many of you, what we're doing is we're going through the Thrawn trilogy right now, and then we're gonna back it up, and we're gonna go through. I think we're gonna include comics. Everything post Return of the Jedi, to the end, to the very end of the EU, and that gives us who knows how much content.
And we'll probably eventually go into prequel and other stuff as well.
Yeah, we'll eventually. Our goal, who knows? Maybe our goal would eventually be literally hit everything.
Yep. Well, might as well.
Yeah, I mean,
nothing new worth watching.
More power to us.
Yep.
But with that, we are two Star Wars nerds. This is episode 2 of the book club. Let us know your thoughts, opinions, comments on this portion of Dark Force Rising, and also if you have any ideas for how to make this more interactive with you, things that you'd like to hear us cover, any thoughts, perspectives, things like that. That would be interesting to keep this kind of book club format going. You guys are in on the ground floor helping construct this. But with that, we are two Star Wars nerds. May the Force be with you always.